Both the U.S. Department of Labor and the Montana Department of Labor address exemptions from minimum wage and/or overtime. Recently, the required salary threshold was changed by the U.S. Department of Labor. This has caused some confusion surrounding the salary threshold for exempt employees. If a couple of concepts are better understood, clarity may be applied to address any confusion and/or misconceptions. As of January 1, 2020, the U.S. Department of Labor raised the salary threshold for certain exempt employees to $684 per week. The exemptions with the salary thresholds we are discussing today are the executive, administrative, and professional. Let's explore each of these further. Common examples for the executive exemption are managers and supervisors. They must meet the salary requirement, oversee 2 or more full-time employees or the equivalent part-time employees, have their primary duty being the direction of the enterprise or a section of, and have the authority to hire, fire, give raises, promotions, or other similar changes, or whose recommendations are given a particular weight. A common example of the administrative exemption is a human resources director. They too must meet the salary threshold, perform non-manual work related to the business operations of the enterprise, whose primary duties address matters of significance, and they apply judgment or discretion to these matters. Paraphrased, they should not just implement the process or procedural change, they should create and implement the change. Common examples of the professional exemption include artists and architects. They must meet the salary requirement and have advanced knowledge in a specific area. This is often accompanied by a degree, or have advanced talent in a recognized field of artistic endeavor. They may also address areas requiring invention, imagination, and originality. There are certainly other professions that may be covered under any of these exemptions. This presentation provides some of the most common examples. Before January 1, 2020, the U.S. Department of Labor and Montana salary threshold were both $455 per week. The U.S. Department of Labor raised their threshold to $684 per week, January 1, 2020. Currently, the administrative rules of Montana reflect the prior salary threshold. As we will address in a moment, if 2 standards exist, the greater of the 2 will generally be applicable. Having what appears as conflicting standards has caused some confusion among employers, employees, and human resource professionals. This confusion can be alleviated with the understanding of a couple concepts. The first is understanding who is covered under the Fair Labor Standards Act, or FLSA, and the second is that of the higher standard. Let us address the FLSA first. For our purposes, the Fair Labor Standards Act has 2 areas of coverage, enterprise and individual. Explanation of the coverage is addressed in the U.S. Department of Labor Fact Sheet number 14. The first of these to review is enterprise coverage. Enterprise coverage applies to businesses with at least 2 employees and sales of $500,000 per year. Additionally, enterprise coverage applies to hospitals and businesses providing medical or nursing care, schools, preschools, and government agencies. Now to address individual coverage. Individual coverage applies to enterprises engaging in interstate commerce. Interstate commerce, or business between state boundaries, can take many forms. It can be as simple as accepting credit card or out-of-state checks as a method of payment. It can involve communicating via mail, email, or phone for business purposes with those outside of the state. It can involve handling of records of interstate commerce transactions, involvement in manufacturing a good that will be shipped beyond state lines, or shipping or receiving items across state lines. Also, domestic service workers are generally covered under the FLSA. As you can see, the vast majority of workers in Montana fall under coverage of the FLSA. This leads us to the concept of higher standard. The U.S. Department of Labor raised the salary threshold for the applicable exemptions January 1st of 2020 to $684 per week. The administrative rules of Montana that address these exemptions reference the U.S. Department of Labor's prior standard of $455 per week. As discussed prior, nearly every employee in Montana is subject to the FLSA. As such, the higher standard would apply. In this case, the higher standard is a minimum salary of $684 per week. In general, if multiple standards exist, the greatest of them must be utilized. The key takeaways from this presentation are: first, the vast majority of employees working in Montana are covered by the Fair Labor Standards Act. Second, the higher standard principle will also apply to nearly all employees working in Montana. Third, before presuming the FLSA or the higher standard principle do not apply, contact our office so we may discuss your specific situation with you. The following resources will be helpful if you have further questions. Please feel free to contact our office directly. We are a resource for you to utilize in questions addressing wage law and working relationships.